I still remember the exact words because they weren't shouted. They were said with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from someone who has already decided who you are before you've even opened your mouth. That machine looks like it belongs in a museum. Then she looked at me for maybe half a second, smiled the way people do when they're trying to be polite but aren't trying very hard, and added, "I can't believe they let someone like him anywhere near a system worth this much." Funny thing is, 11 minutes later, she was standing behind my chair, hoping I could save a deal her company had spent 8 months negotiating. My name's Nathan Brooks. I'm 54 years old, and I've spent more than 2 decades working at Northridge Data Systems just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. I don't have a fancy title. Never wanted one. My business cards have always said Senior Systems Engineer, and I've been perfectly happy leaving it that way. I figured a title might get you invited to more meetings, but it wouldn't fix a broken storage cluster at 2 in the morning, and after enough years you learn which one actually matters. Most people who visited our facility never noticed me. That was by design. I wasn't the guy shaking hands in the lobby or giving PowerPoint presentations to investors. I was usually somewhere between rows of server racks with a laptop balanced on a rolling cart, reading logs while everybody else worried about quarterly numbers. My polo shirts were faded because I bought quality instead of fashion. My work boots stayed dusty because I walked every aisle every morning before most people even got there. My employee badge had scratches from years of clipping it onto tool bags, jackets, backpacks. Little reminders that I'd been around longer than half the equipment in that building. Back in 2017, when Northridge decided to replace an aging infrastructure that had become a nightmare to maintain, I was the one asked to design the new architecture. It took almost 14 months, hundreds of late nights, more coffee than I'd ever admit to my doctor, every backup path, every redundancy, every disaster recovery scenario. Every automated failover process had been tested over and over until I trusted it enough to put my own paycheck behind it. Once it went live, people slowly forgot who built it. That's the funny thing about reliable systems. When they work, nobody thinks about them. They just assume they're supposed to. I never minded. Credit doesn't keep servers online. Good engineering does. That Tuesday started like every other Tuesday. I got in before sunrise, walked through each aisle listening for sounds that didn't belong, checked overnight reports, replaced one failing cooling fan before anyone noticed it, then grabbed coffee from the break room where it somehow always tasted burned no matter who made it. Around 10 that morning, our operations manager stopped by my desk. "Nathan, we've got visitors coming through after lunch. Big investment firm looking at signing a long-term hosting contract. Just smile if they ask questions." I laughed. "You know smiling's never been my strongest skill. That's why I'm warning you now," he said before walking away. Around 1 o'clock, they arrived. Maybe 8 people altogether. Expensive suits, polished shoes that had clearly never stepped onto a raised server floor before, clipboards, tablets, the usual collection of executives trying to look comfortable in a room kept at 65 degrees. Leading the group was Melissa Grant, Chief Technology Officer for Horizon Equity Partners. Mid-40s, sharp haircut, white blazer that probably cost more than my first pickup truck, and the kind of posture that announced she'd spent years walking into rooms expecting everyone to listen. I don't mean that as an insult. Some people earn confidence. The problem starts when confidence turns into assumptions. Our facilities director started explaining how our storage clusters replicated data across multiple locations. About 30 seconds in, he accidentally mixed up active-active replication with active-passive failover. It wasn't a huge mistake, but it mattered. I spoke up without raising my voice. "Actually, that's the secondary environment. Production runs active-active." Before I could finish the sentence, Melissa interrupted without even looking toward me. "Let's keep technical explanations coming from someone overseeing the project, please." She didn't ask who I was, didn't ask why I'd corrected him. Just kept walking. The group followed without hesitation. Our facilities director looked embarrassed, gave me a tiny apologetic shrug, then continued the tour. I just smiled to myself and went back to checking dashboard metrics. After 23 years, you develop thick skin. Besides, arguing with someone who's already made up their mind rarely changes anything. Standing near the back of the group was a skinny kid wearing jeans and a gray hoodie instead of business clothes. He looked maybe 17. He wasn't taking notes. He was actually paying attention. His name was Tyler, son of one of our network administrators, spending the summer shadowing different departments before starting college. As everyone else moved along, Tyler hung back and pointed toward one of the monitoring displays. Mr. Brooks, what does that little blue flag mean? I walked over. That one? It tells the automation engine not to migrate workloads during maintenance windows. Think of it like putting a Do Not Disturb sign on a hotel room. His face lit up immediately. Oh, that actually makes sense, I nodded. Computers aren't nearly as complicated as people. They just do exactly what you tell them, including the mistakes. He laughed. Neither of us knew that somewhere inside thousands of lines of automation code, one tiny mistake had already started counting down toward the longest 11 minutes anyone in that building would ever experience. If you'd like me to continue, about 5 minutes after Tyler wandered back toward the tour group, I noticed something that didn't feel right. It wasn't dramatic. Not at first. One storage latency graph twitched higher than it should have, then settled back down. Most people would have ignored it. I couldn't. After enough years doing the same job, your eyes start catching patterns before your brain even explains why they matter. I opened the monitoring dashboard and watched another graph spike. Then another. That's odd, I muttered, mostly to myself. Before I could dig any deeper, every light on the primary operations wall shifted from green to yellow almost simultaneously. A second later, they turned red. Every alarm in the room came alive at once. The sound wasn't loud because someone wanted to scare people. It was loud because every second counted. Conversations stopped in the middle of sentences. Phones came out. Chairs rolled backward. Somebody yelled. Note 14 just dropped. Another voice answered from across the room. No. Bull. 17's offline too. Then someone else shouted. It's spreading. That's the word nobody ever wants to hear in a data center. Hardware failures happen. Network outages happen. Even power events happen. But when something spreads, it usually means one failure is creating another, and another after that. I stood up before anyone asked me to. Habit more than urgency. Melissa had stopped walking with the tour and turned toward our operations floor. The confidence she'd carried through the building a few minutes earlier disappeared almost instantly. She wasn't pretending anymore. She knew enough about technology to understand that a room full of blinking red dashboards never meant anything good. Who's in charge? She asked our facilities director. He opened his mouth, looked toward the operations team, then looked directly at me. Nathan. She followed his eyes, and for the first time that afternoon she actually looked at me instead of through me. There wasn't time to say anything. I was already pulling my laptop open. Nobody touched the automation controller, I said loud enough for the room to hear. Unfortunately, 2 junior engineers had already started trying to recover failed nodes one by one. Every restart command brought another cluster online for a few seconds before 3 more disappeared. One of them looked at me, frustrated. We're losing everything. No, I answered calmly while logging into the management console. We're losing it because you're treating the symptoms instead of the disease. The room went quiet enough that I could hear cooling fans over everyone's breathing. I opened the deployment history. Nothing unusual. Security logs looked clean. No intrusion alerts. Storage health? Perfect. Network utilization? Normal. That ruled out hardware? Good. Hardware takes time. Software can be reasoned with. I pulled up the automation scheduler, and there it was. A script that had been updated just after 7 that morning by one of our DevOps teams. Nothing malicious. Just one configuration variable pointing toward the wrong dependency group. Tiny mistake, 1 line. That's all it took. Every time the automation service detected what it believed was an unhealthy workload, it migrated that workload somewhere else. Unfortunately, the incorrect dependency map convinced it that healthy servers were actually the problem. It wasn't protecting the system. It was dismantling it one perfectly logical decision at a time. Dominoes don't care whether the first push was intentional. They all fall the same way. Found it, I said. One engineer leaned over my shoulder. Can we just stop the script? Not anymore. He frowned. Why not? Because now half the environment depends on decisions it already made. Freeze it now and you'll trap live workloads between clusters. Melissa stepped closer. Can you fix it? I didn't answer right away. I hate giving promises before I understand the cost. Instead, I asked, how long before your team has to leave? She blinked. Our board meeting starts in 25 minutes. I nodded once. Good. Then we've got enough time. Tyler had quietly walked over and was standing several feet behind me. He wasn't saying anything. Neither was anyone else. Sometimes silence says more than panic ever could. I disabled only the schedule's future actions while leaving the existing migration table intact. Then I isolated the corrupted dependency tree into its own virtual partition. If I'd missed even one relationship between storage pools, We'd end up with orphan data. One mistake now would turn a recoverable outage into permanent corruption. I started rebuilding the dependency map manually. No automation. Just years of remembering why every cluster existed in the first place. People think engineers memorize commands. We don't. We memorize consequences. I knew exactly which node had to return first, because I'd argued about that design during a planning meeting 6 years earlier. I knew which replication links could safely wait because I personally tested them during a hurricane simulation. I knew which storage controller would panic if another cluster came online too early, because I'd written that protection myself after discovering an obscure firmware bug. Every decision I made that afternoon had actually been made years before. The room only happened to notice them now. Bring Cluster 7 online, I told one of the engineers. Only 7. He hesitated. Not 4, trust me. 30 seconds later, Cluster 7 turned green. Now, 16. Another green indicator appeared. Database replicas? Someone asked. Leave them alone. But they're still offline. Exactly. Let them stay offline. Melissa watched the monitors like someone waiting for a doctor to leave an operating room. Her clipboard was hanging loosely at her side now. She hadn't written anything in several minutes. Every few moments someone looked toward me, waiting for the next instruction. The funny part was that none of this felt dramatic from where I sat. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. It felt exactly like replacing that cooling fan earlier that morning. Same job. Bigger consequences. That's all. I remembered something my first mentor told me back in the late 90s. If you're ever the calmest person during a disaster, don't waste energy trying to feel scared. Everybody else is already doing enough of that. So I stayed calm. 5 minutes passed. Then 7. Red indicators slowly became yellow. Yellow became green. Storage synchronized. Replication resumed. Database integrity checks started passing. One by one, services came back exactly where they belonged. Finally, I restored the corrected automation engine with the fixed dependency map. I hovered over the confirmation button for 1 extra second, mostly because rushing the final step is how people create sequels to disasters. Then I clicked it. Every remaining dashboard refreshed at once. Green. Entire wall. Green. Someone near the back whispered, "No way." Another engineer leaned back in his chair and laughed. The kind of laugh that only happens after your body realizes you're allowed to breathe again. Total recovery time, 11 minutes and 19 seconds. 0 customer data lost. 0 permanent corruption. 0 emergency failovers required. Tyler was still standing behind me. He looked around the room, looked back at the dashboards, then started clapping. Just one kid. One pair of hands echoing across a room full of people who hadn't quite processed what had happened yet. Nobody joined him immediately, because everyone else was still staring at the screens. Eventually, a few engineers smiled. One nodded toward me. Another quietly said, "Nice work, Nate." Then our facilities director cleared his throat and turned toward Melissa. "You asked earlier who oversees this system." She nodded without speaking. "You're looking at him." She frowned slightly. "Excuse me. Nathan Brooks designed the architecture you're evaluating today. Every redundancy you just watched work, every recovery path, every failover policy. He built them. Half this room learned the system from him." For a second, I actually felt bad for her. Embarrassment has a look to it that's hard to fake. She replayed the entire afternoon in her head right there in front of us, interrupting me, dismissing me, talking over me, assuming the man with worn boots couldn't possibly know more than the people wearing tailored jackets. She slowly walked over while I closed my laptop and packed away the charger. "Nathan," she said quietly. I looked up. Her voice sounded completely different now. Not weak, just honest. "I owe you an apology." I rested one hand on my laptop bag but didn't answer yet. She took a slow breath. "I judged you before I knew anything about you, and I was wrong." The room stayed silent. Nobody wanted to interrupt what came next. I looked at her for a moment, then smiled just enough to let her know I wasn't interested in making the moment any harder than it already was. "We've all been wrong about people before," I said. "The important part is what you do after you realize it." She nodded, but before either of us could say another word, Tyler asked a question that made every person in that room stop and think. "If you like the ending, say." Tyler looked from Melissa to me, then back toward the wall of monitors that had finally settled into a sea of green. "Can I ask something?" he said. Nobody answered, so he kept going. "If you knew she was wrong about you, why didn't you tell her who you were?" I couldn't help smiling because that question had probably crossed everyone else's mind too. I zipped up my laptop bag, leaned against the edge of the desk, and said, Because if someone only respects me after hearing my job title, then they never respected me in the first place. The room stayed quiet. Melissa lowered her eyes for a second before looking back at me. That's fair, she admitted. And honestly, I deserved that. She apologized again, this time not because people were watching, but because she meant it. She told me she'd spent years moving from one executive position to another, making decisions quickly because she believed speed was a strength. Most of the time it was. But somewhere along the way she'd started confusing confidence with certainty, and certainty had turned into assumptions. I saw an older guy in a faded polo shirt, she said with a small, embarrassed laugh, and I filled in the rest of the story without asking a single question. I shrugged. Happens more than you'd think. Before she left, she turned to our facilities director and said, when we finalize this partnership, I want Mr. Brooks included in every technical review. If we're trusting our clients' data to this platform, I want the person who actually understands it sitting at the table. I appreciated the gesture, but what meant more to me came a few days later. Instead of sending another executive, Horizon brought several of their younger engineers to spend 2 days learning how our infrastructure really worked. Melissa came with them, carrying a notebook instead of a clipboard this time. She asked questions, listened carefully, and even laughed at herself once when she admitted, turns out, I still have a lot to learn. That's the version of her I remember now, not the woman who dismissed me on the tour. People can change if they're willing to admit they were wrong. Not everyone does, but some do, and those people deserve a little grace. As for Tyler, he finished his internship that summer and stopped by my desk before heading off to college. You know what I learned this year? He asked. I figured he was about to mention servers or networking. Instead, he smiled and said, the smartest person in the room usually isn't the loudest one. I laughed. Took me 40 years to figure that out. Glad you got there a little sooner. Every now and then, people ask why I never chased management, why I stayed in the same role while others climbed the corporate ladder. The answer's pretty simple. Somebody has to build the ladder. Somebody has to keep it standing while everyone else climbs. I was always happier being that guy. The systems I designed are different now. Technology never stands still. Hardware gets replaced. Software evolves. Younger engineers come in with ideas that are better than mine. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. But one thing hasn't changed. Every time I meet someone new, I remind myself that I know absolutely nothing about their story until I take the time to hear it. The quiet woman taking notes in the corner might be the founder of the company. The janitor walking the hallway may have been the engineer who built the building 30 years ago. The older man wearing worn-out boots might be the only reason everything is still running. You just never know. Looking back, the biggest lesson from those 11 minutes wasn't about technology at all. It was about humility. Servers can be repaired. Software bugs can be fixed. Pride is usually a much harder problem to solve. Melissa and I still exchange emails once in a while, and every Christmas she sends a handwritten card. The first one ended with a sentence I'll probably never forget. Thank you for teaching me to look twice before making up my mind. I keep it in the top drawer of my desk because it's a good reminder that sometimes the best victories aren't the ones where somebody loses. Sometimes the best victory is watching someone become a better person than they were the day before. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated because of the way you looked, your age, your clothes, or your job title? Or maybe you've caught yourself judging someone too quickly and later realized how wrong you were. I'd genuinely like to hear your story. Share it down in the comments because those conversations matter more than most people realize. And if you believe character is worth more than appearances, experience matters more than titles, and respect should always come before assumptions, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs that reminder today. You never know whose quiet voice is holding everything together until the day the whole room finally has to listen.